From a DM who gets punished for doing exactly what his players asked him to do, to a player who has mastered the art of being a victim. I'm Saya from Tabletop Mayhem, and if you enjoy stories like these, please be sure to subscribe and hit that button so you don't miss out on other Reddit RPG horror stories like our stories tonight that focus on two people who need a reality check. Our first story is a little long, but it's incredibly worth it. It also gets me a little steamed up, so I'm going to do my best to get through it as fast as I can without exploding too much. Wasn't allowed back because my character was too secretive. The cast: me, Paladin, problem player, Barbarian, problem player 2, and DM. There were others, but they aren't too important to the story and were kind of just bystanders. So I've been playing with the DM, Paladin, and one other for about a year before the events of the story, and we all had a good friendship going on. The Paladin player was a little averse towards me, but it was widely known that he didn't appreciate me talking with his boyfriend, the DM, for extended periods of time after sessions. After the campaign where I met them, the DM decided to start a homebrew Zaki-style campaign with a bunch of kingdoms and political intrigue. The works. It was really well made, and I agreed to join in on it, as the rest of the group did. The Paladin asked if one of his friends, Barbarian, could join, and we were all fine because what could possibly go wrong? Session 0 was around, and I introduced my character as a true neutral genie warlock who made his way as an exotic dancer and kept his pre-Zaki life as a secret because he was ashamed of who he was back then. The end of the session was after a huge fight in a magic train where the character decided that he was not going to fight with a bunch of strangers and instead snuck up to first class car and chilled inside of one of the rooms for the rest of the ride to their destination. This did not sit well with the Paladin or the Barbarian, but the rest of the players were fine with it since there really wasn't much space to fight anyways, and most of the players and the DM said that they were okay with a non-good aligned character who kind of just did whatever as long as I didn't actively put the party in danger. I'm doing good not exploding. Fast forward a few sessions, with nothing of note happening, and my character once again decides to sort of dip from what's going on, not combat, and do his own thing. At this point, we are high enough in level that I've taken aspect of the moon feature, so my character can just do stuff without having to go to sleep. This mostly consisted of meditating, talking with my patron, and just general shenanigans that ended up in many laughs for most of the party, except of course the Paladin and the Barbarian, who hated that my character would never tell them what he was up to at night prior, or were completely okay with the other characters actively doing drugs. My God. Several more sessions go by, and I start to notice the hate towards my character is getting to such a point that the DM is having trouble keeping his own anxiety over it in check, so I talk with him about retiring the character in favor of a more straightforward and honest character. Aw, what a stand-up guy! He agrees, and I roll up a fighter for the next session, which is strange when you already have a Paladin and a Barbarian, but okay. And he was introduced. On the session of his introduction, my character proceeded to absolutely demolish the boss encounter, mostly by himself, while singing the praises of his new allies. He truly shone as the beacon of hope and strength I had made him to represent, though I always made sure that to try my best to keep others in the spotlight so as not to come off as the main character syndrome guy. After some time, I've noticed that the Paladin and the Barbarian were still getting on my case about the character being a little too reserved, and I even apologized for and made an effort to interact with the party in every occasion that presented itself without being overbearing, and as it seemed to work for a time. Unfortunately, I discovered that their problem was not my character, but with me instead. Anytime I wanted to do something or even suggested an alternate plan, Paladin and Barbarian quickly shut me down, and we had to do their plan, even if it was too dangerous for the party to do. We barely made it out of some encounters and should have been easy to resolve because Paladin and or Barbarian came up with some harebrained scheme over my character who had military training and leadership roles versus two. I eventually talked to the two of them with the DM present to try and hash out what their deal was with me and to see if it could be resolved, which basically boiled down to, we will try to be better about it. Unfortunately, I had to move shortly after, and I gave the players and the DM notice beforehand so it wouldn't be sudden and I would be unable to communicate for a time. Once I get set up at my new place, I attempted to rejoin, but it never seemed to be the right time. So I just sat in on a few sessions hoping that the next one would be the one I would be reinduced in. No such luck. I talked to the DM and he said that he felt comfortable with the current number of players, so he would let me know when he was ready to bring it back up to include me, and even told me he missed having my character around. Several months passed and I lost hope of ever coming back to the campaign when I noticed that they had added a new player. I had never left the Discord since I talked to all of them through there without telling me, and just hoped I wouldn't notice. I talked to the DM and asked him if he had a problem with me specifically, since I saw that he had added a new player instead of talking to me to bring me back in, and he told me that it was because my character was too reserved. Even though I rectified the issue long ago, I'm still convinced that the Paladin and the Barbarians were the ones who convinced him not to bring me back, and since they were the only ones who took issue with my character and me, even after I had clear effort to appease them specifically, and unfortunately the DM is too shy and nervous to stand up to either of them, especially his boyfriend. Am I in the wrong here, or was this just doomed from the start? I cannot tell you how incredibly pissed off that this story made me. I mean, as a player, as a DM, I would have been so incredibly I wonder how many times you can say pissed off on YouTube. The delusion of this player to go onto Reddit and try to find people that agree with him, try to find people that justify his behavior, is atrocious and immensely delusional. This is the type of player that DMs write in to Reddit about. 1000%. This is a problem player. Creating a player that dips out on a fight, not just a fight, the very first fight in session 1, is ridiculous. That is such a garbage thing to do to anybody. Even if you don't want to fight, then stay there and try to not fight but do something else. But the fact that the justification was, I don't want to fight with a bunch of strangers. My character would have thrown hands in the campaign. After that fight, I would have gone up to the first class cabin and I would have thrown freaking hands with them. You have every right as a player to address a character v character. You may be like, hey man, I didn't appreciate that. Why did you do that? Is that something we expect? Should we not rely on you in fights? Call the behavior out character v character. I love that. I think that's such a good way, especially if everybody felt that way. That was absolutely ridiculous. And as a DM, when you create encounters, you're creating encounters thinking that there's going to be a certain amount of players to fight. So that could really mess a fight up. Not necessarily at level 1, but that could really mess a fight up much later on. But the fact that this character then chooses to use downtime in the campaign to go on these little 1v1s with their DM while everybody's just sitting there doing nothing, sleeping, and he's the one who's going off and having little adventures. So he's not participating in the collaborative portion of the game, of this collaborative game. He's not storytelling. He's just waiting there, dragging his feet, not participating, and then waiting for his moment so he can go off and do the one thing that he wanted to do. This literally is... This would be so incredibly aggravating. And to tell you the truth, I would just skip his parts as a DM. If he doesn't want to be a part of the collaborative game, I just wouldn't. It'd be like, okay, well, then you talk to a DM. Okay, the next morning, everybody wakes up. I would never give him that attention. Doing that every once in a while is great, but that's when everybody gets a spotlight, not just the one player every time they rest. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Oh my gosh. But I do read the comments under these videos, and I think it's because I want to make sure that I am getting that I'm not coming off too judgmental. And I think that I'm very good at seeing through people's BS. It's something I've always been able to do. And he got people on Reddit. He got people on Reddit to agree that, yeah, he made a really crappy character, but he tried to rectify it, and no one should be treated like that. BS. He is so incredibly manipulative. You want to know how I know he's being manipulative? Because when he chose to come back, what did he come back as? A fighter. When they already had a paladin and a barbarian in a party. Now he's put himself in direct competition with the two players that have a problem with him. And not only did he come back as a fighter, he came back as a fighter that could outshine them. He made sure that when he came back, he could outshine them. You just heard what he said. He came back and he basically killed this big baddie almost by himself. But while doing it, he was singing the praises of everybody else. He wasn't singing their praises. He was mocking them. I guarantee you that's how that came off, was absolute mocking. I would tell you right now that the fact that he can't see that's how everybody else took it. And the fact that like people on the internet fell for that is why people like this are continuously allowed to do this in campaigns. Absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, and it's funny that he was like, oh, no one's listening to him. Nobody listens to his ideas if I want to do something else. And I was like, well, it's because you're not a part of the party. You can't dip out of fights. You can't dip out of the things you don't want to do and then think that they're going to think you're a part of the party. You're not a part of this party. They can't rely on you. You don't have their backs. Like, you don't. You are just some guy who's showing up to this campaign, these sessions, and sitting there waiting for your turn, your turn in the spotlight of 1v1 play. You're not a part of this party. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I can tell you right now, when this guy decided to move, there was a sigh of relief that they hadn't out. They should have blocked him from Discord, to be honest with you. I mean, I understand that he was friends with some of these people, and as people's friends, I know that it's very hard to have these hard conversations about them just being crappy players, and that's what he is. These aren't crappy characters. He's a crappy player. He's not a collaborative player. None of these characters that he has brought to this campaign were collaborative. So, I mean, all I have to say is good luck. Good luck with your future campaigns. But I don't think these people are ever going to play with you again. I wouldn't. Our next story, how an adeptly created a horror story for my players. Yeah, this is about me, yours truly. I really messed up and created a horror story. First off, I'm not exactly a new DM, so this isn't forgivable by any means. But let's get into it. I play with 4 other friends, and we have recently started a new campaign. However, I have a tendency of overbalancing my games, which means most of my encounters aren't all that difficult to handle. Usually I give my players more than a few per day to make sure that there's a bit of a challenge, which has always been fine and dandy. However, my players asked me recently if I could make more memorable encounters that would be really tough and that would test their mettle. It was a fair request, and honestly, improving their experience was something I really wanted to do. However, these are not the kind of encounters I usually come up with, so I came to Reddit for help. The subs are filled with great advice regarding this sort of thing, some more nefarious than others, but I didn't think about it at first. Well, come our session last night, equipped with all my knowledge, the campaign starts. Immediately, they noticed a change in how things were going. Enemies were still similar, but way more nefarious, abusing conditions like paralyzed, knocking prone, and absolutely demolishing them. Good. I can see their reactions, but I guess I became too engrossed in it. Shitty, I know. Since they were closer to meeting a boss character, they managed to get some long rest and then proceeded to it. But I had visited Reddit. It wouldn't be normal, right? Well, I turned into action economy to the top. Boss wasn't alone, and he was a powerhouse on himself. That's when a player went down, dead. They started to become very agitated. But this became even worse when I did my next step, which was blatantly stolen from a story in the sub here. Boss turned to the cleric of the party, and he threw a bag at them that fell just in front of their feet, revealing a ton of diamonds inside. Then he said, "Bring them back. This is fun." Laughing wickedly. This is good. Well, that's when they freaked out. I guess I didn't notice the reaction so far, but they weren't good. We stopped the session with understandable pissed players. I told them I was sorry and that this wasn't the reaction I wanted them to have. I apologized profusely. There was somewhat understood where they were coming from, and I'll tone everything back down. But yeah, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth to know I created such a bad experience with them. Well, this is my story. Oh, and if any of you guys are reading this, I'm so sorry, and I really just wanted to make you all have fun. Bring him back. I'm having fun. Damn, man. That's probably the most glorious thing that's come out of your mouth while running sessions for this group, which happens to be a group of babies. Man, I feel like I'm just being extremely snatchy today, but I also don't think that I'm wrong. I think that it's obvious that you've coddled and babied your players to an absolute disadvantage. I mean, they're literal crybabies. And when you threw a real D&D encounter at them, a real bad guy, you said he was your boss, he was a boss bad guy, they crumbled. I mean, it's my belief that players should never feel comfortable or confident going into a fight, especially a boss fight. They should always fear death. And if they're not fearing death, then you're doing something wrong as a DM. I mean, what are they doing? Just holding hands, skipping through your campaign, hugging it out? Like, I don't understand. I mean, I hate to tell you this, but this bad guy that you created feels like a very typical bad guy. I mean, he sounds badass. He's super creative, and I love the way that you elevated the fight. But that's what you're supposed to do. That just felt like a regular encounter. I just feel like your players your players are just big babies. The boss is supposed to, your bad guys are supposed to piss your players off. Your bad guys are supposed to hurt your players' feelings. They're supposed to physically hurt your players' characters. They're supposed to kill your players' characters. The characters are supposed to stop that from happening. But it's obvious that they don't have the coping mechanisms, because one of the things they could have done is resurrect this guy and run. Like, he gave them the opportunity. I mean, realistically, I mean, you set them up, but because they've been babied so much, they don't have those coping skills. They don't know what to do. You made your players feel invincible, and they should never ever feel that way, ever. Unfortunately for you, this is your group. They're your 4 friends, and it's a pity because you sound like you could be a really powerful and creative and dark dungeon master. It sounds like you have the dedication and the devotion and, you know, the spirit to create some wonderful campaigns. And I hope that you get that opportunity to do so. I'm not blaming you entirely for this. I'm just letting you know that it's a DM's job to try to kill their players. No, it's a DM's job to, you know, create these scenarios where your players need to overcome obstacles. They sometimes die, like, you know, to become heroes. It's that reward, and right now you're just spoon feeding them. So, I mean, it's not on you. I wouldn't feel bad about this. You have really nothing to apologize for. Man, I feel like I'm being incredibly harsh today. Maybe I need another cup of coffee or something. But I don't think that I'm wrong. I'm really having a hard time finding sympathy for either one of these posters. I do feel sort of bad for the DM because I feel like he was just wanting his players to have a good time. But ultimately, I mean, he created this group. So, I mean, I wish him all the best, but our first story, that guy is literally the epitome of a problem player. My gosh, I'm actually hoping that the DM will post about him, but I would love to hear your opinions on this. How would you have handled this if you're a player or if you were the DM in the situation? What are your thoughts? Please leave them in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Happy adventuring.